Imagine how difficult life would be if you never learned to read. So many career paths would be permanently closed off. You would even have trouble doing basic things such as ordering a meal in a restaurant or staying up to date on current events. In this day and age, everyone needs to learn how to read fluently. To be honest, if students don't learn this essential skill, not a whole lot else they do in school is going to matter. It's important enough that we just can't afford to get this wrong. So what's involved in teaching kids how to read? Well, in order to be a fluent reader, you need to be able to do two basic things: decode words and understand what you are reading. Unfortunately, schools have gotten both of these things wrong, and this has resulted in many high school graduates unable to read at an acceptable level. Decoding simply means being able to say the words on a page. There is a pile of research showing that phonics, learning how to sound out individual letters and words, is an essential component of good reading instruction. Despite this evidence, schools for years had discarded phonics and replaced it with something known as whole language. You see, even though phonics had proven to be very effective, Romantic progressives didn't like how repetitive it could be. It was very teacher-directed and didn't let students construct their own learning process. So the edubabblers came up with a new approach called whole language. Instead of teaching students to sound out the words, whole language let kids figure words out for themselves by reading lots of picture books and guessing what they thought was the correct type of word. Of course, there was no evidence that this new method worked, but that didn't stop it from being implemented in almost every elementary school. Now, to be fair, most schools today have come to the realization that at least some phonics is needed in reading instruction. So whole language no longer has the total domination that it once did. Chalk up at least a partial victory for common sense. However, as important as phonics is, it's still only one part of what students need to become good readers. Along with being able to sound out the words, they also need to comprehend what they read. Otherwise, it won't make any sense to them. This is where curriculum content makes such a big difference. All too often, educators, particularly those who teach in faculties of education, downplay the importance of content. It's not what kids learn that's important, they say. It's the process of how they learn. This de-emphasis on content means students often spend far too little time learning important facts and basic knowledge. However, your best chance to understand what you are reading is if you know something about the subject at hand. For example, you're most likely to understand an article about baseball if you're familiar with how the game works. Similarly, you're only going to understand a newspaper article about politics if you know some basic things about government. E.D. Hirsch, a well-known education reformer in the United States, referred to this concept as cultural literacy, or core knowledge. A great way to make sure our students become strong readers is to immerse them in a content-rich curriculum early in their schooling. Curriculum guides need to be clearer about what specific knowledge students need to acquire. And no, this does not mean making curriculum guides even thicker and more convoluted than they are right now. As a case in point, English language arts curriculum guides are very long, very wordy, and empty of much useful. The prescribed outcomes and suggested strategies are so nebulous that you could teach pretty much anything and still meet them. Rather, we need textbooks that contain real information and are not simply glorified experiment guides as they often are now in science, or a series of disjointed stories as happens in social studies. We know a core knowledge emphasis works because schools that put this in practice significantly outperform schools that use regular curriculum guides and textbooks. By putting these two things together, phonics and core knowledge, we will graduate students that have the ability to read and understand virtually anything they come across. So what's with the new math kids are learning in school these days? Perhaps you've seen some of the new math textbooks and wonder why they're so confusing. It's almost like they're trying to present simple problems in the most confusing way possible. Consider a simple multiplication equation like 21 times 13. Here's one of the techniques recommended by a widely used grade 5 textbook. Suppose you aren't happy with your neighborhood grocery store down the street. Prices are too high, the food isn't fresh, and the service is mediocre. What do you do? If you are like most people, you'd probably just shop somewhere else. After all, there's lots of other grocery stores to choose from.